Great, thank you. So returning to public session now. So in private, we viewed the CCTV footage from inside the bar and also from outside, from the altercations at the start of the incident through to the culmination of the incident with the two people on the floor. So we were asking questions to the representative of the bar. Do either of my fellow councillors want to ask any further questions?
Not at this point, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Bacchini, I think. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, it wasn't only the owner of the premises present when the two individuals were hit. So why also didn't the other, like the DJ or even people attending, they don't seem to be like really shocked with seeing two people on the floor. I'd really wish someone can, maybe Mr. Petrit, if he can describe to us in his own words. You can't. Why, like why they didn't even phone? I'm really trying to understand why a 999 call wasn't made.
Yeah, I completely understand that point. It may well be that it's something that the DPS can address in due course. Insofar as we are presently concerned, you can see that after the incident has occurred, the DPS is back within, Mr. Pageauget is back within the premises within seconds. And so he didn't remain outside with those two gentlemen. It may well be that perhaps that is something that he should have done. It's ultimately a matter for you in due course to make decisions as to how it was that he approached that situation after the initial adrenaline rush, after the initial split-second decision was made, in light of the conduct of those two individuals. As I say, our position is that even if there are concerns about the lack of a 999 call being made, those are concerns which can be addressed by other measures. So, for example, tightening up of conditions and the replacement of the DPS with Mr. Pageauget taking a backseat, measures which, of course, wouldn't have the wider impact on the premises and the public that it serves. I think that's as far as I can go for today. I hope you understand the reasons why at this stage, but of course you'll hear from Mr. Pageauget in due course at the final hearing, yeah, and probably other witnesses as well. I think the DJ is going to provide a statement in due course.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Nopal.
Chair, if I may, I want to ask the officers a question as to whether they have any records of any previous incidents at these premises, just to understand if Mr. Pageauget acted out of character, if there've not been any previous issues at these premises, and he normally handles them quite well.
I'll allow that, even though it's slightly out of sequence, but
thank you, Chair. I appreciate it.
Do you want to respond to that?
Hello, Chair. Yeah, whilst this venue hasn't come to notice a lot on police indices, there have been one or two previous incidents. One which was an allegation that the DPS, I think it was at the time when the venue was called Cavalieri, had slapped a female, but that was prior to me joining this department. I think that didn't go anywhere because whilst it was recorded, no formal allegation was made at that particular moment in time. So that is the only incident of significance that we could find prior to that. But in terms of transparency and stuff, there hasn't been many accounts regarding this before, and this incident is the one that we are aware of in recent times since I have been working in this department. I hope that clarifies.
Thank
you, Sergeant. And was the premises under the same ownership then when it was Cavalieri, or was that different owners?
Yes, it's been exactly the same premises license holder and DPS since it was Cavalieri. Exactly the same. They just did a name change.
Okay. Right, Councillor Bacchini had your hand up.
Yeah, following on from your question, does Mr. Petrit managers and any other clubs or bars in Ealing?
Mr. Pajerge may be, I'm sure he can answer that question. That's nothing to do with this particular incident. So, Mr. Pajerge, are you able to assist with that? Do you manage any other? No. No more. Can I just briefly jump in, because obviously there's been no other evidence relating to any previous allegations or incidents at the premises. Had the police sought to rely on those matters, we would have hoped to see the material, but I do appreciate it's obviously a summary review and it was prompted by a simple and straightforward question during the course of the hearing. I would just note in relation to that, it appears to have been confirmed very frankly and fairly by the officer that didn't go anywhere. Obviously, there are no previous incidents which have ever led to a review before the licensing subcommittee. So in terms of acting out of character, certainly this incident is a one-off in every sense of the term.
And can I ask a question to Mr. Dowding?
Of course.
You talked about reasonable force, and just in the now that we've seen the CCTV, are you still maintaining that reasonable force was used throughout the incident?
I am, absolutely. As I say, the law, and again, it's not a matter for you to determine whether someone is criminally liable, etc. But I simply spell it out for as you've asked the question about reasonable force. But what the law says in relation to reasonable force, and I used the term before, is that a person is not required to weigh to a nicety the degree of force to be used in a particular scenario. If you're under threat from someone, if someone is challenging you or you fear an imminent threat of violence, you are entitled as a matter of law to use reasonable force in response to that. And you're not required in doing so to weigh up in your own mind in that split second the specific degree of force required. Now, clearly here there is no weapon. There was no follow-up attack. There was no sort of ground pounding as the people were laying out on the ground. It was a single punch from a gentleman who ultimately is a large man. There may well have been more force in his punch than perhaps in my punch, but at the end of the day, it was a split-second decision made in circumstances where this SIA-trained member of staff had been dealing with two very difficult patrons who were repeatedly attempting to regain access to the premises and, in effect, assaulting a member of his staff.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dowding. So now, if there are no further questions from the panel, we move to the summings up. So can I invite Mr. Soleimani, please, to briefly sum up the case for the police? Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, I should say at the outset, I didn't view the CCTV evidence beforehand because it wasn't submitted before this committee, and I didn't want to be making submissions based on evidence you hadn't seen. That was the first time I'd seen it, and frankly, I was shocked. I mean, the police do describe the situation fairly, but I think they understate it, and you'll have seen that too. I mean, there are a few points to be drawn from the CCTV evidence that I have to make very clear. Firstly, you can see that the second man, the friend who has hair, was clearly trying to de-escalate throughout the entire situation, holding his friend back, trying to calm things down, wasn't rushing towards Mr. Pajerge at all. And he was also punched in the head with sufficient force to be knocked out cold. There's absolutely no basis for saying that was reasonable. And my learned friend kept saying the phrase, a single punch. It is important to be clear, there were two punches. There was not a single punch. There's a punch to the first man. And then after that, he'd had a punch, had a moment to recover, punches again. Second thing is we were told, or it was emphasized, that the bald man was rushing Mr. Pajerge and posed a serious threat to him. I mean, from the CCTV, that wasn't my analysis of it. Mr. Pajerge is a large man. There's another large man with him. This bald man kept jumping forward and jumping back. The punch seemed to come out of nowhere at that point. It seemed like he just wanted to put an end to the situation. It didn't look like he was trying in the split second to protect himself from an oncoming threat. That was my view, but you're entitled to take whatever view you like of the CCTV. I would also say that we were repeatedly told the PLH was acting in the heat of the moment. Essentially, it was almost like a moment of madness, of animal instinct. But to me, he looked quite calm. I thought I saw you waving his finger to the man who's coming before and warning him that something was going to happen. It didn't look like he was making a split-second decision to protect himself. It looked like he just decided to put an end to the matter. Additionally, I would note that even if they couldn't close the shutters, it looked to me like they could have just locked the door when the two men were outside. All of that to say, Chair, none of what's been said by my learned friend, none of what we saw on the CCTV explains two very important things. One,
Why, after punching the first man out cold, Mr. Bashir decided to knock the second person out cold, punching them in the head with sufficient force to knock them out. 2, there's been no explanation, not from Council, not from Mr. Bashir himself, who hasn't said anything about it, why he didn't call 999 or an ambulance or the police to look after these people, and why he just left. He just left them on the ground outside, knocked out unconscious. No explanation was given for that. No explanation could be given. All of this discussion about reasonable force, Chair, falls away as soon as you think about the fact that he punched the second man who wasn't posing a threat to him. There is no basis for saying legitimate force was used here. There is no defense in law on these facts. So, Chair, I mean, that really is all we would emphasize. And I would also point out, you know, we have to ask what the proportionate measure here is and what the alternatives are to suspension, because that's what my learned friend and his client are advocating for. You shouldn't suspend. We should do something less significant. They suggested, for example, you could modify the conditions. Well, we have a problem here because he already failed to comply with his conditions. It was a condition 30 of his license, that he calls the police and an ambulance as soon as there's been an assault on the premises. He didn't do that. It would be ridiculous for this committee to see someone committed 2 counts of GBH, 2 serious assaults, in breach of conditions of their license, then say, oh, well, the proportionate measure is to change your conditions. We can't trust them to abide by that. We were told that we could change the DPS, but that would take time. We obviously can't change the PLH, but we were told that he would promise that he would take a step back from running the premises. That isn't good enough. At this interim stage for the next few weeks, for the safety of the public, we need to ensure this venue is closed. Mr. Bashirji is not running this premises for the next few weeks until we have a full hearing. And then we were told a lot about how, you know, the facts aren't clear at this initial stage. And yes, it's early, but we do have CCTV. The CCTV, in my view, is very clear. We all saw what happened. There's not a lot more that needs to be said for you to make a decision on this. So in reality, Chair, we think suspension is the minimum necessary requirement to uphold the licensing objectives of protecting public order. We do not trust this individual to run a bar. We do not trust him to keep his customers safe. We do not trust him, say, if there's another incident in this bar, which there often is, where a customer is being unruly, unpleasant, aggressive. We do not trust him to de-escalate matters because he's proven himself to be a violent and irresponsible person who commits violence against his patrons and then doesn't call the police afterwards. Suspension is the only proportionate response for a crime of this nature and where a PLH has behaved so recklessly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Soleimani. And now can I hear a brief summing up from Mr. Dowding?
Thank you very much. Mr. Soleimani made a number of references there to not trusting the premises. Now, of course, the police are making submissions to you, but you are the decision makers. You will have had a much longer dealing with this premises, not necessarily you specifically, but the licensing subcommittee, than the police have, or certainly the specific officers who are involved in this case. You've heard clearly that there has not been any previous incident involving this premises which has led to a review. There's not been any previous incident which has proceeded beyond an allegation, and ultimately anyone can make an allegation. There is then the safety net of an investigation, which ultimately may go nowhere. This is a premises who you have trusted to operate a successful alcohol licence within the local area for many, many years under the same ownership. Mr. Pajerge has proved himself time and time again. He's actively engaged with the licensing authority. It was he who sought an extension of his licensing hours. He who put forward conditions in relation to that extension that were then added to the licence and have been abided by ever since. That was the extension application where I mentioned previously just under 500 local people supported it with a petition. This is a successful local business, and this is the first incident of its kind which has been recorded on the record. So it's simply not right to say that this is a person who cannot be trusted to hold an alcohol licence over one split-second decision made a number of days ago on the 19th of September. And it's worth bearing in mind one incident which, since which the premises has continued to operate again without issue. Since that incident occurred, which has been treated seriously by Mr. Pajerge, he has cooperated with the investigation. It was he who provided the CCTV. It was me who offered to show it to you in the first instance. Mr. Pajerge has said that he will attend a voluntary interview to provide his account, and his members of staff will provide witness statements in due course. As I say, this is a gentleman who can be trusted and has been trusted to do a good job in the past. Now, in terms of the footage, I take obviously a very different interpretation of that, having been the one to invite you to view it, than my learned friend Mr. Soleimani does, and that's perhaps a product of the fact that footage alone, A, is open to interpretation, and B, does not show you everything. It doesn't record the audio. You haven't seen the footage from the entire evening. We don't know exactly what was going on in those moments where you see mouths opening, words coming out, heated arguments taking place. What the footage does show is a single punch in relation to each male, and I made that clear in my opening submissions. I also made clear that the second male certainly was attempting at times to get between the aggressive bald male and the members of staff. I stated that in terms. But the point being, at some point during the interaction, he turns to face Mr. Pajurje. He also acts in an aggressive fashion. His friend repeatedly steps rapidly towards Mr. Pajurje on a number of occasions. You'll have noted that the DJ at one point has to pull him away and attempts to restrain him against the wall of the premises. He wasn't having any of it, and again attempted to walk at speed towards Mr. Pajurje. Now, if my learned friend Mr. Soleimani is right, and if Mr. Pajurje had simply wanted to be reckless and aggressive, then when the bald male opened his arm wide inside of the premises and attempted to start a fight with him, he would have reacted, wouldn't he? But instead, this SIA-trained DPS who has operated this premises for many, many years stood calmly. He didn't take any action, and he attempted to de-escalate. He successfully managed to remove them from the premises. He successfully attempted again to de-escalate with one member of the public, at times seeming to intervene on his behalf. And it was only at that final moment, when he is approached at speed and has seconds to make a decision, that he made the decision that he did. Now, again, it's easy for us to look at this footage and take a particular view of it, but none of us were there in that exact moment. And as I say, none of the facts, or not all of the facts, are known at this stage. We don't have statements from all of the parties who were there. We don't know what was said. We don't know precisely what was occurring. But based on that footage alone, in my respectful submission, it's patently clear that he reacted at the very end of what was a prolonged incident, during which he was not the aggressor, during which two members of the public were actively seeking to breach licensing conditions which he was seeking to enforce. In terms of the action that you can take, again, I do stress that this is an early stage of the investigation and there will be further evidence in due course. You haven't heard everything, and so you're making your decision without the full facts before you, and that is why Parliament provides you with the flexibility it does. It doesn't require you to suspend a licence immediately upon hearing the police case. It requires you to wait the full 28 days before making a final decision, or at least a date close to that 28 days. At this stage, I invite you to find that there are conditions, plainly, that can be added to the licence. They are the ones that I have outlined. Mr. Soleimani is incorrect to say that there was a breach of the conditions. There simply wasn't a breach in relation to the CCTV condition, which does not relate to outside of the premises. Oh, sorry, not the CCTV, the calling the police condition. That can be extended relatively straightforwardly by yourselves. There can also be a very clear condition that Mr. Pajurje cannot use his SIA licence whilst he's within the premises, that it must be independent SIA members at all times or at specific times during the course of the premises being open. And finally, you have the power to remove Mr. Pajurje from the licence as a DPS. If that step is taken, it will have the immediate effect of forcing the premises to close until a suitable DPS application is made before you, one which the police will have an opportunity to comment on, and one which you will have the opportunity to decide. That is a step which would lead to a sea change within the premises, new management being installed, and additional conditions, all of which would tighten matters up and would not have the disproportionate impact which immediate closure would have on employees and members of the public. And so I urge you to have those proposed conditions in mind when you go away to deliberate and to come to a proportionate decision in this matter, unless I can assist further at this stage.
Thank you, Mr. Dowding. So the panel will now retire to deliberate on what interim measures we'll put in place together with our legal advisor and clerk. Hopefully we should be able to return around 12:20, 12:30, but we reserve the right to take longer. Sean, please stop the stream.
Sorry, I think one of the officers had a question.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, one point of clarification that my officers sought to raise, if I could ask a question through you, is that we understand the blue notice for the licensing notice that was outside the premises has been removed now, and we just want some clarification as to why that's been removed, if that's possible.
How's that understanding arisen?
Sorry, yeah, I received an email at approximately 2 o'clock this morning from somebody that lives nearby, informing me that the blue notice had been removed.
Right, let me ask Mr. Pagerge.
Myself and PC Catter went down about 7:30 this morning, and we could see that both blue notices that were on the shutter and on the pillar had been removed.
Yeah. And right. Mr. Dowding, just to add to that, the council licensing officer has just gone down and re-put those blue notices up on the shutter and the pillar on the one side. So just to make you aware of that, sir, and councillors, to make you aware of that as well.
Thank you, I'm grateful. Mr. Pagerge, I don't know if you're able to assist with that. Did you have any knowledge of that, or can you help?
I'm not in the country currently, so if they've been put back on, I'm more than happy for them to stay there, and I'll relegate to the staff so they're not to be touched.
Okay, right.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. So as I was saying, we're now going to return to deliberate. Yeah, I think 12:30 would be a reasonable time to come back, I think, but we do reserve the right to take longer. So Sean, can you stop the stream, please?